So Jay, are you at all nervous about this?
Totally.
Yeah, I have total stage fright. I've been a mess all day. I healed it by eating about 40 pounds of baklava.
Oh,
I know, my diet is shot.
I went to the gym.
You went to the gym? Oh, the opposite. Oh my God, yeah. He's like a real physical fitness, martial arts, right?
Yeah.
And we want you to know something about us. I love this idea of a salon. I have to admit, yes, vengefulness was my first thing when I left the round table just before Hamas attacked Israel and the news got incredibly weird, not just interesting, but as weird as it's been for the past 2 years. So, I mean, our first idea for this was like the rip-off round table. I still sort of like that name, but it's not going to be it. It's a salon. And I have really been fascinated with the idea of a salon because I grew up as a Hemingway fanatic. And he was a member of the Gertrude Stein, very famous salon. It was the model in the 19th century Parisian capital. And Jenny, you're not Alice B. Toklas because she would be out in the kitchen with the spouses, but the invited guests would be in here with their little drinks, and they would be very intellectual, also incredibly catty and bitchy, and talk about important issues of the day. And we sort of want to create that here. Jay and I talked a few days ago. We've come up with a whole outline and an outline like with letters A's, B's, C's, 1, 2, 3, and we're ready to throw it all out the window. If you come up with something completely different you want to talk with, that's fine. You don't have to wait till a designated time or raise your hand. You can just yell out if you want for a question, and we'll do that. And I guess we think about after like an hour, we might want to pause and give you a chance to get a drink or popcorn or go to the bathroom or something like that. And we're just going to see how it goes. I want your feedback during it, after it, at any time. Like, I think it would be cool if you did X, Y, or Z, and we will try it because this is very much in flux, okay? So Jay, tell us a little bit about you, because I'm a big mouth. The most surprising thing about me is that it's really only my mouth that's used. I'm actually kind of I get that all the time. Oh, I thought you were taller. But you worked in newspapers for many years, as I did, and I want them to hear about you came here.
And I still do. I work part-time for the Times Union in Albany. I used to be the opinion editor, and about 2 years ago I said, it's about time, and I was really praying that they would offer a buyout about a year before I was ready to retire, and sure enough the memo came out 14 months before I was going to retire, and I said, okay, I'll just quietly go into the publisher and say, well, all right, I guess I'll try to take this. So I got a year free of my life, but as I work for the Hearst, we're part of the Hearst Corporation, and as the publisher said at a going away party for a whole bunch of us, a bunch of managers retired at the same time, he said it's kind of a tradition in the Hearst Corporation that you retire on Friday and you report for duty on Monday. And that's what I did. I really was not ready to quit, and the person who was my successor was also my copy editor, essentially, but she was much more than a copy editor. She was my partner in everything we did there. And I recommended her for the job, and she got it. She said, the only thing is you've got to stay in some capacity because I can't handle this job alone. So I said, I'll stay through the 2024 election. And depending on the outcome of that, I'm either gone or I'll stay for another 4 years. So I am staying for another 4 years because I watch people around me try to deal with what's going on now. And if you don't have an outlet of some kind, or you either withdraw or you get active, one or the other, or you go crazy. So there's actually three. It's kind of the Monty Python thing. There are three things that you do. I watched my wife go crazy kind of for the last 2 years, and I finally had the good fortune to run into a woman in a little local business. I live in a small village, and she wanted to start a group. She didn't want to call it a resistance group. She didn't want to call it indivisible or anything, but she thought, why don't we try to put something together with this little village and all these rural towns that, Trump signs everywhere. try to get people together. So in my capacity as an opinion writer, I can sort of, do that kind of thing. I could not do it as a reporter. But just to dispel one myth, and then we can get into stuff. And I think Rosemary would probably agree with me on this, that we strive for objectivity in what we do as journalists, and I certainly did that for most of my career, which was about 28 years on the news side and about 18 years now on the opinion side. But you still have a sense of this is wrong, something's right. So you write about corruption. You don't just say, well, maybe that's corruption. No, I'm going to go out and prove it's corruption and expose it. And so, journalists aren't, we aren't some totally detached automatons that just, transcribe news, and we don't have an opinion on what is right and wrong. So the transition through opinion was a lot easier than I thought it would be. But anyway, just to finish
I had no problem going into opinion.
No
yeah.
But as an investigative journalist, as
an investigative reporter, you go find the evidence and you prove that empirically that it's not just my opinion. Yeah. The problem with expressing opinion is that it's exacerbated the idea that we're biased. I can remember David Hyatt. Is that David Hyatt? Fred Hyatt, sorry, who was he's now dead, but he was the editorial page editor of the Washington Post during the first Trump election. And he came out with a very unusual, he was the chief guy, but he wrote it himself. It ran on the local front rather than in the usual editorial page. And he did it right after the political conventions. And he said, we will never endorse this man. He's a unique danger to democracy. And it went on in very incredibly strong language in a very prominent place. And I remember thinking, that is so brave. He's doing something very different because he sees this as unique. And I was right. But so was the guy sitting next to me who was a Trump supporter saying, oh, they're never going to be fair to that guy. Look, they were against him already. By being honest and straightforward, the media has convinced the other side, and I'm assuming most of you, if there's any Trumpers here, then you better really speak out. But we have convinced them that we're unfair. And I can remember on the roundtable, Jay is also on the roundtable, he still is. We would have days where people say, we're so sick of hearing about Trump, can we talk about anything else? In figuring out the topics for today, we never thought about anything else. We didn't even mention it, and we actually could talk about things, martial arts, elder care. We are kind of experts in those things, but this is Trump, and that's what we should be talking about now. We want to spread out, I think, tonight, some of the scope, the depth, the breadth of what is going on. It is not just in one area or another, it's every day. We did this on Sunday, let's put together something that we're going to talk about in 2 days, and said, we're probably going to have to revise it because there'll be something else. That's how bad it is, and this is what makes it unique and different and especially scary and threatening. So we have some topics. Do you want to yell out what you think are the things that are most horrible that you want us to talk about? I hate that idea that, oh, this is just a distraction. No, it's all bad. So we can talk about any of it. I don't want to rank. Corruption is worse than, his nepotism is worse than, it's all bad.
It is. I write a column once a month. So I have one, and I write 2 editorials a week, but the column's special to me. So, it's like that one chance I have. And it's to me, when I was talking to Casey Seiler, the editor, he said, so how much could you work? How much could you fit in within 40 hours? Because there were pension issues and things like that. I could only work 39 hours, actually. And he said, could you do 2 editorials a week? And would you mind doing a column? And my lifelong dream was to be a columnist. So just as cool as I could, said, I think I could squeeze in the column. But now so I have I have 12 columns a year. And you sit there and you say, this is my one opportunity for the next 31 days to have an impact, a personal impact on the world. And And then you start to write one discrete topic. So
Right.
the discrete topic this coming Sunday is 8647 and the whole flap over Comey and so forth. And that led into, what it turned into was, it turned into a column about free speech and the assault on free speech
Right.
and political weaponization of the Justice Department. And, and as we were talking about the other day, and this is kind of the setting of the table, that it's just the breadth of what is going on is astounding. It isn't just Donald Trump who has the energy to do this. It's a whole
And the
administration.
lack of any organized resistance is just as astonishing.
Yeah.
Because there's so much going on, and there's no seeming, organized approach to fighting back against that.
And there's no place to make a stand.
Yeah.
A stand that's effective.
Right.
What's different about this administration regime is that while he was out of office, he and a bunch of conservatives who realized what Trump could do for him sat down and analyzed what went wrong with his first administration and what their goals were, and then put it together. And that's Project 2025. That's absolutely it. And we're going to talk in a minute, Project Esther, we got to get to.
Yes.
Same group. They said, okay, what are the organizations that stymied you the last time? And every one of them have been systematically attacked, starting with the press, which is folding. I'm sorry, traditional media is dying. It is so moribund right now. And you just saw the 60 Minutes, both the producer and the head of the network now are gone because Paramount, the parent company, wants to make a deal that will require federal approval, and that requires Trump being happy with them. So they're kowtowing, they're bending these. So media, big target, law firms, vengeful action against law firms, universities. You saw what happened, Yale, Harvard. And then the last one is the military, which also started. Miley stopped his use of the military for his own ends, and now he's gone. Everybody who would stand in his way is gone. That's planned. Every bit of this is planned. And now we're just seeing really like petty little things. The racism is completely open. I'm astounded by that. And the corruption is very open. So that's what we're going to start with, corruption. Do you want to start or shall I? I mean, there's so many places to go on that.
I asked the question today. No, I did not ask the question today. It was in a, yesterday we had an editorial board meeting with the head of a new ethics commission in New York that had gone through a lot of challenges from people who didn't want an ethics commission, and they felt that the way it was done was unconstitutional. It finally all got resolved with the Court of Appeals, which is the highest court in New York. And so we had the chairman of the commission come in, and he was very good. He talked about a lot of things and what they want to accomplish, what they are accomplishing, how they're reorganizing the whole thing. And I did not expect this question. We had talked about, the same way you and I did on Sunday. We usually talk about what we're going to do in an editorial board meeting, so we know we don't surprise each other. And we know that all the topics have been covered that we want to cover. And so the editor surprised me. The opinion editor said, just hypothetically speaking, and I know that public officials don't like to be hypothetical, if a governor wanted to receive a $400 million luxury jet,
Or even a small one.
how would you feel about that? And would you launch an investigation? And what would you do? What would you do? And it was, he said, I could tell you right now, it would be unacceptable. We wouldn't publicize it because advisory opinions are confidential. It's the one thing they kind of keep confidential if they don't do a formal opinion. But he's, come on, this is absurd. So the corruption is just out there. When he said this, and now we're finding out that he initiated this. It wasn't
Yes.
the emir or whoever it was calling him up and saying, Donald, would you like a $400 million jet?
And there's deception even about the value of the plane. Yes, it's a big honking giant plane, but in order for it to become Air Force One, it is going to require hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions even, of our money to inspect it for bugging, to outfit it with security. I mean, I guess I have several questions about it. Like, he does have a point that the plane now that he's using was used by Poppy Bush. That's pretty old. Okay, so maybe he does need a new plane. Why wasn't that in the works? It turns out it is, but it takes a while to build one of these things, and he'll be 2 or 3 years into his service. He doesn't want to run around a dirty little old plane ahead of time. And it's such vanity. It's such horrible. Why? And we're like risking our moral values and our ethics for his ego. And then there's Bitcoin, which is like, you think 400 million for a plane is a lot. He's making millions on Bitcoin. And worse than that, as you pointed out, Jay, he's setting up U.S. policy, governmental policy that favors Bitcoin, which favors him, which favors his family. And that's what's happening. The Trumps are getting very, very rich. Who did we hear about that about? Oh, yeah, the Bidens, the crime
Biden
family.
crime family.
So Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, was asked about this. Like, doesn't this bother you? You complained bitterly when it was Biden's involved. He goes, no, there's nothing wrong. He's doing it all out in the open. What the heck kind of scam is that? That's like that's a kid saying, no, Mom, I'm not stealing anything out of the cookie jar. Like that. Yeah. The New York Times had a piece on corruption, which I thought was really great, and they said that shamelessness is Trump's superpower. He goes, yeah, I did it. I was smart to cheat on my taxes. You'd be stupid if you didn't either. Or, yeah, I'm taking the plane. I'd be stupid not to take this rich plane. And we're buying it. Or by we, I mean way too many Americans buy that. They think it's ballsy and refreshing. It's bracing to have someone who is clear about what he wants and goes and gets it. And what's wrong with protecting your family? I'm telling you, I heard the same stuff when I was working in Uganda. And there's a dictator who's been there for over 30 years now. He worked the same way. In the 70s, family, especially his close family and his son and his tribe, were loaded. And the feeling of everybody else in Uganda was, oh, I wish we were in his tribe. Then we'd be part of it. And Americans used to be different. You know, we used to say, no, that's not fair. One tribe should not be better off or get favors of the other one. We're becoming one of the shithole countries that Trump used to talk about.
I just want to go back to the plane for 1 second, because one of my favorite stories about spycraft is the building of the American embassy in Moscow. And they talked about the bugging of the embassy. And this is going back, I think, to the 70s. There was a scandal with that went even deeper than the microphones hidden in the building. And I think this actually, I think this may even go back to the 60s. So if you can imagine, we're back in the 60s. We're not in an age of a desktop, a computer on every desktop, cell phones, any of this. This is old technology. We're talking about high technology was IBM Selectrics, and I mentioned those for a reason. The Russians figured out a way to put a device inside the ball head of a Selectric, and they could listen from a block away, or receive signals from a block away. And as the thing turned, they could tell how it was turning and how the letters lined up with the page and what was being struck on the page. And that's how they learned so much about what was going on in the American embassy. The fact that technology existed back then, at that level, in the size of a little IBM Selectric ball, tells you, or to tell Trump, that it's every millimeter of that jet that they are going to have to go through if it's going to be usable as an Air Force One. And it's just insane that he is so blind to this.
Yeah, Trojan horse, exactly. There's memes about that.
Yeah.
You don't have to raise your hand, just yell out.
Yeah.
So I want to know if the beware of Qataris bearing gifts is actually, do you think that's really what it is, or do you think it's just, I mean, it's Trump's vanity, of course, but do you think there's really something to that?
It's no government gives money to Trump because they like him, because he's such a great guy. They don't get the charisma we have. They did it in the first term. They stayed in what hotel in Washington, D.C.? It was not the Hyatt. It was Trump's. And now who's buying Bitcoin now? It's foreign governments. They get it. And right now, he's planning a dinner, a lush dinner at one of his country clubs for the biggest investors in the Trump family Bitcoin company. This is access. That's what politics is all about. You got to be next to the man to make your case. And the way to Trump's nearness is really plain to see. It's easy. And it isn't unique to Trump. You know, the Clinton Foundation, and we're just talking about this, the Clinton Foundation made a lot of money, let's be honest, because Hillary was Secretary of State, and foreign governments did the same thing. Their donations dropped off when she left office. Trump has perfected it, though. He has studied it, and he knows he's, I think, being used by other political operatives, the Heritage Foundation. He doesn't care, because he's getting tons of money just doing this. He is so much richer now. We don't really know, because he doesn't give us his tax forms, but he is so much richer now than when he began in politics.
The estimate is that his whole family has made $2.5 billion just on Bitcoin-type currency in the last 100 days. It's astounding. And you know, the other bit of corruption, there's just so much of it, is so the hotel, he ended up selling the hotel, but now his Donald Jr. and two or three other investors are opening up what's called audaciously the executive chamber. It's a $500,000 a person membership fee, if you want to do that here.
I'm happy to do that.
And they are advertising that you will have access to people in the administration who will come to the executive club, and you can mingle with executive chamber, and you can mingle with them. And this is
what Hunter Biden was accused of. They they proved it to a certain extent, but this is the exact same thing. They have learned from other administrations and have declared it, okay, well, no, other people did it, so we're doing it too, and wow, isn't it fun that we're helping the American people? They're not, but we are amused by it. A certain segment, a big segment of the public is just amused by this. It's so nakedly corrupt and dangerous, and it terrifies me.
When I sit down to try to write all of this, I kind of I like to focus on the big either Sunday editorial, which is our largest of the week. I got indulge. I used to set a hard rule as the opinion editor, and I had to kind of live with that for a while as just a lowly editorial writer. I used to say 450 words and stop.
That's like 2 pages.
Yeah, two typewritten pages. It's
double space.
It's unbearable as a writer to have to live within that constraint. I mean, you think you come in and you go, oh, I only have to write 450 words. I can do that with my eyes closed. Then you start writing all this, and my editor credits me very kindly with being able to do these big picture editorials on Sunday. They were usually closer to 900 words. 850 to 900. Sometimes I'll go over 1,000. And once I sit down and do this, one thing after another starts to come to mind, and I feel, okay, this has to be part of it, like the executive chamber. And I said, wait a second, I heard about this, and as I'm sitting here about to write it, I don't believe it's true. It can't be. They wouldn't do that. And then I look it up, and it's 10 times worse than I thought it was. It is, you know, I spoke originally about the 3 states of mind that you can be in this situation. It is what keeps me sane, is knowing at least I get to write about it. It is crazy. And the idea that we're living in this country right now and we're living through this, it's kind of, we'll have something to tell our grandkids, that's for sure.
But you know, well, you can
We
tell.
already have stuff to tell our grandkids.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, right.
You can tell, though, that we're dinosaurs. Like, you talk about 1,000 words. I do a podcast, and I started at 30 minutes, and I'm edging up now, hour, because of this. It's just so much. Young people. Notice, you know, we're all of a certain age here. Young people are not listening to it. They're not getting it all. I teach in college. One of my students, I said, you should be teaching the class, Media in the Digital Age. She has 150,000 followers on TikTok. And she talks about, her relationships and her nails and her hair. And she does it like in between classes and working, like lying on her bed. She'll put the camera up. It's 30 seconds. That's it. 30 seconds. She said, sometimes I go a minute, but I always have to cut back. Those are the ones that get the... So we have to explain all of this in 30 seconds. 1,000 words is way too much, and
Yeah.
an hour is
Oh,
way
yeah.
too much. So people are missing this. They're missing what's going on. And now let's talk about cult of personality, which comes out of the corruption. I can do this. I'm above all the rules. God put me into this office. I was saved from death. A bullet came within inches of my brain. I'm here to save you. So for my birthday, we're going to have a big party.
With
$100 million military parade. And it's going to rip up the streets of Washington, D.C. to have big military equipment. But who cares? It's a blue city. We don't like them anyway. And it's it is an audacious socialistic display. And let's talk then also about the new portrait. Did you see this on the FDA building? The Agriculture Department was set up in 1862 by Abraham Lincoln. So there's a huge poster on their building of Abraham Lincoln, and it's now on the right-hand side and on the left-hand side, and that's messed up. There's Donald Trump.
I saw that. I thought it was photoshopped
Yeah, no.
when I
no,
saw
it's
it,
real.
and it wasn't.
Yeah,
I-
I said, when I
could not
said,
believe it.
yes, I see what you mean, yeah, that's like, this is some joke, but no, it really is not. So you're.
And if you notice, this kind of goes along with the cult of personality and how I think from the beginning he knew how to market himself. That photo, I believe, is the same photo that CNN used when they did debates. And it is, it's that.
Is it his
that
mugshot?
No, it's his leaning forward.
Leaning forward, being
I'm,
powerful.
intense into the camera kind of thing. And he's been using it ever since as one of his key photos. The fact that CNN, we as a newspaper, we have headshots of people, and we try not to be unflattering about it. But we also don't try to do glamour shots of people and, or publicity shots of people when we do headshots. We want to just capture the person, and that's it. And I noticed the Times, I don't know if you notice, they're doing these videos now where they have a story about something and there's a person moving in slow motion into the camera.
That's
and I'm
the
like,
Times.
what is going on here? It turns me off and I don't
interesting.
read the pieces, so,
Yeah.
which is bad.
Well, Trump definitely is interested in his image. You remember the portrait that was done of all the presidents that hangs in Colorado. He didn't like his, and he put pressure on Republicans to take it down and put up one that was more flattering, that made him look, I don't know, as good as he thought that Obama came out looking. And Trump's interest in the arts and why he so cares about the Kennedy Center. I want to do a whole podcast on this because art is extremely powerful. We see that in Albany with the display that's at the Albany Institute of History and Art right now. And it's people who tell the truth. And it's the faces of, patriots and minorities and founding fathers and lots of women, lots of people of color, all the diversity of the country, all saying truth, even when they were not popular at the time. So we understand how powerful art can be. So does he. And he's trying to control that too. And he's not getting enough pushback. I mean, the New York City Ballet is going to perform. Why? I don't get why he does not, why there isn't, you talk about organized resistance. Why is there not just grassroots, disorganized opposition? It's intolerable.
I think if we focus so much on every single day we're bombarded, we were speaking about this as we drove out, you know, the latest thing, NPR isn't going to get funding, right? Okay, so that was a headline. We'll forget about it, and we don't know what the implications are 6 months from now, a year from now, because in the meantime, 50,000 other things have come that have been just as horrible. And
part of
so
the
we're losing
strategy.
track of everything. It's just this constant barrage of horribleness, and there's no, you know, I mean, underneath of him and all of what he's doing, it's a constitutional crisis we're having. And when he came into power, what happened was he made us realize that all the checks and balances that we have in place require everyone to agree and to participate. And as soon as we've never had somebody who just said, "Fuck you, I'm not going to live by this." So I think instead of responding to him, we need to respond. What do we have? What tools do we have? You know, and one of the things I think we have, and I've been pushing this, I think we have a class action suit opportunity that if we could find a constitutional attorney, lawyer at Harvard or Yale or Columbia, something like that, and create a class action, that's at least an actual tool that we have. Impeachment is not a tool to the people. You know, we don't have anything to respond to. So I feel like a class action suit could actually.
I thought there were a lot of.
But I mean, a single
The
class action against-
ACLU has been doing lots of very effective court actions. There are two problems with this. One is you need a lawyer. Trump is working really hard to make sure you don't get a lawyer who wants to go against him. And number two is he appeals and he wastes time and you end up in the Supreme Court, which is now rigged for the rest of our life.
Right. But if
It's only gonna get
But if
worse.
the class action is the President of the United States is a clear and present danger to us as members of this class. I mean, it's a long
Yeah.
process, but it's a tool we have until we don't. And if we don't act soon, we're not even going to have that because they're going to all be rigged anyway. All the courts will be rigged.
I think with a class action like that, you're going to have to go one violation of the Constitution at a time. So if you had a chance, it was riveting. And I'm not that. I don't think I'm that much of a news junkie that it wouldn't be riveting to the average person to listen just to a very gravelly voice, the Solicitor General arguing the other day for the he was trying to stop the Supreme Court from ruling on the issue of birthright citizenship. He felt that what they had to argue, what the only thing that they could argue on was whether or not it was a
One judge could actually make a national injunction. One
Right.
judge in Houston can say, no, you can't deport people of such and such nationality.
and the counter arguments on that from Sotomayor, from Ketanji Brown Jackson, and from Amy Coney Barrett were, so we have to sit around until some judge out there decides that this is constitutional for us to have a quote-unquote controversy, which is what the Supreme Court normally deals with, before you'll agree that this can come to the court. And in the meantime, you get to violate the Constitution person by person by person by person by hundreds of thousands of people, that you're going to deprive them of their rights. And we're supposed, and they said, we got to get to the issue. Now, how are we going to get there? And so one of the issues was, one of the processes was either we decide to do the issue because we're the Supreme Court and we can do that, or a class action suit. And they were basically saying, how fast can somebody get a class action suit together and get it through the courts to us?
I am impressed that they did that because, again, they do any technique that they win. Don't forget it was Republicans who used the same national injunction thing to stop, I can't say the name of the pill, the abortion pill. Yeah, that one. It was one ridiculous judge, so extreme right in Texas, who said, no, the FDA's decision was wrong. We have to relitigate the whole thing again after 25 years. That was one judge. So they've used the very thing that they're arguing against now. And I I think lawyers should be really ashamed. I want a class action suit against lawyers. It was John Eastman who concocted that whole stupid thing about the insurrection, am I wrong? I mean, they are using the law in unique ways that have never been used before, and they are winning. The Texas abortion thing, the vigilante justice, that was the right, using lawyers, using loopholes. How come the emoluments clause didn't hold? It's in the Constitution. It's not an amendment. It's right in the main body that you cannot take money if you're the president from a foreign government. Trump took a whole lot of it the first time, and now he's just doing it in the open and saying, congratulate and applaud for me. And it went nowhere in the courts. It went nowhere in the courts because it says you don't have standing.
And as we pointed out in the editorial, the domestic emoluments clause falls under the executive. The foreign emoluments clause falls under the legislature. So it's up to Congress to do this.
Yeah.
And they're not. They just won't. And so on a brighter note, when you
Oh
said,
yeah, we need brighter notes. That's good. I am not providing any bright notes.
I want to be the saccharine at least here.
That's why you're here.
Okay.
You have to be the sweet one.
I'll try. I do look for bright spots, and it's hard. I was on vacation recently. I can't say who I was with. But I was on vacation. One of the individuals with us was a lawyer for one of the largest law firms in Washington, and got the news on the Friday that we came down that they were going to capitulate to the president. She's a partner, but a junior partner. And she was miserable. I mean, this started out like a really fun vacation. The bunch of us had not gotten together, and I could see it in her face. She was just, there was a cloud over her, and she had to take breaks every once in a while to get on conference calls. And they finally said, we're going to have the senior partners and all the junior partners. This is hundreds of people. It's one of those big law firms. We're going to explain it to you, but it was pretty much a fait accompli at that point. And so we're sitting at dinner, and I said, look, I know I'm a journalist. I will treat this off the record. I just want to know, if you want to talk about it, how do you feel about this? And she started opening her mouth, and her husband just said, no, we're not having this discussion. And I said, you can trust me. We've been friends for a very long time. And I said, you can trust me, I'm not going to write about this at all. I may talk to him about it in a salon, but I won't talk about it. And we just had we just got nowhere on that. But
How is that a bright note?
The bright note was, that this is a lawyer who's got, she just got partners, so I don't think she's going to walk away from this. But there were other law firms that suddenly won the cases right after that. The Supreme Court said, no, you can't do this. I think it was the Supreme Court actually said.
Yes.
They put an injunction on this. And I have a feeling that law firm really regretted having done what they did. So
I think Columbia regrets that they folded because Harvard has gotten kudos and lots of money, I think, donations.
And that's why I think we're seeing some successes.
Okay, I'll try to take heart from that. On the other hand, I mean, and you've seen it too, if on any of your social media accounts, people are saying, oh, you better be careful writing that, or aren't you nervous writing about that, or I'm not putting that, I took the bumper sticker off my car. I think this is like a time when not just journalists, because investigative reporters have always sort of been, cowboys going, oh, yeah, I'll do it. I think we all have to be a little more brave than we have to be. And yeah, they might come after you. And I think that we have to be willing to do that.
I agree wholeheartedly. And quite honestly, like the attorney, if that really, it's time for us to be okay to lose a little. Because this is it. I mean, if we're going for our own comfort and we're all doing it, then none of us are doing anything, even if we go and protest. And I'm not saying I'm above it. I like my comfort, and I don't know, I probably made decisions that aren't the best. But where's the pressure? I mean, New York State's governor thanked Trump yesterday. That made my stomach turn.
Yeah, I agree.
What did you say? New York State's governor thanked Trump yesterday. So we're supposed to be one of the most progressive states, and she thanked him because that was easier.
Yeah.
So the arsonist came into New York and set fire to it. And the translation there is, the federal government did stop work orders on our wind turbine development. And then the arsonist came and said, all right, we'll let you continue to build your wind turbines. And our governor thanked him for that. So, like, I get that there's politics here, and it's a lot more complicated than anything I'm saying right now. But we need to start getting comfortable with being uncomfortable and pushing back. And you know, I'm in a position in New York government that, you know, if you know, that maybe I shouldn't be talking against our governor, but that doesn't matter anymore because this is wrong.
Right.
I'm not going to thank the arsonist for giving me a drop of water after setting fire to my home.
Right.
I just wrote that down. The next time I see Kathy Hochul, I'm going to ask her about that.
Okay,
'cause
give her my name.
I won't involve you in it.
Okay.
But I was as irritated as you were when I read that press release, because this is not what he does. This is not what, well, you live in New York, so you know when I say Elise Stefanik who I'm talking about. If Elise Stefanik was in that situation, her press release would say something like, I had demanded that Donald Trump not do this, and he has finally capitulated. That would be how she would handle it. But Kathy Hochul was, you know, she was polite about it. I wish she hadn't been. I understand why she was. She feels she doesn't want to make an enemy of this guy because he's very vindictive. But thank you,
That's
sir.
power.
May I have another?
You can't empower that. He is getting messages from all kinds of Democrats that I can count that, because he's a narcissist, and narcissists never see mercy or kindness or compromise. What they see is, oh, I beat them, they're weak. And Newsom is doing it, Gretchen Whitmer is doing it, Kathy Hochul does it all the time. Really, who? I want Andrew Cuomo back. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm a feminist, I get it. I want Andrew Cuomo back, because he did go up against him, and he's a jerk in the same way as Trump, but he beat him.
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah, you have to use the same method. Who was the Chris Matthews, the guy,
Yeah.
the journalist for years? I hated him. He interrupted subjects, he was rude, he said, that's not right. He was like the Bill O'Reilly of the left. He was the only person who really interviewed Donald Trump and got any information from him. He got Donald Trump to admit, like, yeah, I think if you have an abortion and you're a woman, a mother, you should
Yeah,
go to jail.
it should
He's
be
the
a
only
punishment,
one.
yes or no.
Yeah,
Just like
yeah,
that.
and he was a jerk about it.
Yeah.
But that's what, I'm sorry, I think that's what it takes. And
that's the whole
that's why he
thing.
wins.
Yeah, that's the whole thing about bullies.
Yep.
Is they don't respect weakness. And so that the more that you say thank you or whatever it is to them, and politeness is weakness. Absolutely. And so now it's just sort of pure dominance, you know, and you think about
Yeah.
like a school or whatever where the bully reigns, you know, and anybody who like is being nice is going to get bullied.
Right.
And the only one who ends up being able to win against the bully, unfortunately, is somebody who's willing to punch back, somebody who's willing to dominate that bully.
So
then-
I don't think Pete Buttigieg is that guy. He's too nice.
No, he's not
I saw
nice.
this President.
I don't know that
Pete,
he's
you
that
know.
nice, but.
So speaking of bullies, what about Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin? Two bullies.
Yeah, Trump is a
But-
piker compared to Putin.
Is that the
yeah.
problem? He's just not enough of a bully to bully Putin, so.
He
I mean, Putin's
admires,
not.
Trump admires Putin because Putin has achieved what he wants to.
But
which
Putin
is-
does not admire Trump.
Oh, no, totally uses him.
Well, Putin also, I think, literally has blood on his hands. Literally would kill somebody.
Oh, sure.
Well,
Donald Trump doesn't do any of that.
He lets- yeah.
He lets other people, he's like the
He's
talker.
the mafia, they compare him to a
Yeah.
mafia don who
Right.
doesn't give the direct order, he just lets it be
Yeah.
known what he would like.
Yeah.
The way he fired Comey, I mean, Comey was on, you know,
Yeah.
the FBI director, you can call the FBI director, get him on the phone if you're too afraid to stand up to him.
If you're the president of the United States, you
But
can
he
call
didn't.
anybody.
He
He
said
could even
he's-
probably get me on the phone.
He sent his bodyguard. He sent a bodyguard
Yeah.
out to California to
insulting.
tell this guy he's
Yeah.
fired. I mean, that's so cowardly. So cowardly.
Yeah, no, I think Putin is completely playing Trump. He's figured it out, and he's not hard to figure out. You flatter him, you give him some money, you give him an opportunity, a business opportunity for the family. That whole trip, the first trip, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, these are not the most important countries in the United States for any reason, not even oil anymore. There's no reason to go, and the UAE, I'm sorry, that's the third one. There's no reason to go there except, there's gonna be new Trump properties worked out there.
There was supposedly talk today, he's talking about Ukraine,
Oh,
but instead they talked about business opportunities.
yeah.
You know, whose business opportunities it's going to be. I think Trump has a dream of building that hotel in Moscow. I don't think the press has invented that.
No.
He wants to do it, and, somewhere near the Kremlin, and that'll be the new executive.
And I don't think
the Winter
he's
Palace.
Right, the Winter Palace. I don't think he's joking about taking over Greenland, taking over Canada. I think he really wants all that and thinks he can get it. The Panama Canal he wants back. That's a Putin move, that we built that canal. That should be ours.
So does anyone have a take on whether or not the military will end up backing if he goes like that far off the rails? Maybe he's off the rails, but if he actually invades Canada, whatever,
They'll go along. My prediction would be they go. They have stripped away the military brass. Hedgebath will do anything Trump wants, and he's gotten rid of many generals. He's gotten rid of lots of competent people, and I always ask the question: if there were a protest, like say there's a protest on June 14th, and people are objecting to the military parade, do you think he'll have Armed Forces, National Guard, or something go in and stop that? I totally think that he will try. Our soldiers are overwhelmingly lower and middle class. Would they go along with it? I think you could see mutinies. You could see some people breaking away, but I really do think we're in danger.
Yeah.
But it seems
Do you
like
agree?
it's coming. It seems like it's coming to. It's going to have to. I hate to say it, but it's going to have to come to some kind of crisis or violence. Because we don't have the same institutional, support that we used to. We're sort of used to going the normal routes, whether it's the courts or whether it's the media being the watchdog. We don't have those systems as we used to have them. So what do we have left? We have protest, which we know how that's going to be met if it's large enough and it's aggressive enough. But maybe that's what it's going to take. It's going to take some kind of real falling apart of our society. I'm just not sure what other avenues there are at this point. We started off this whole conversation, where is the resistance? We're still there. Where is the resistance? As much as we admire the media is a third party. It's not an actor. Its job is to review or to observe and to report. And half the media is compromised anyway. It's not reporting accurately. So we don't have the institutional support anymore.
correct. It's
So
all
how do
weakened.
we respond?
Yeah.
I hear a lot of people worrying about that it is a violent, that the alternative is violence. I did see something today that gave me hope. It worried.
There's that word again.
It worried.
We're doomed, okay? That's my position.
It worried me, it disturbed me, and yet it gave me some hope that at least somebody is thinking about this. So what do we do on June 14th if, projection is I'm convinced is everything with Donald Trump and with the people who surround him. So the idea that there was a Biden crime family, we clearly see a Trump crime family here. We clearly see open corruption. It was all implied with the Bidens. And I'm not saying they were innocent. Hunter was a disturbed young man from my perspective. But not barely younger than me. But I saw a piece today from somebody with very explicit instructions on what to do if, the right used to always talk about false flags, that there were plants, that January 6th was a peaceful demonstration until Antifa got involved, or the FBI got involved and instigated the violence and stuff. It was bullshit. But the idea that somebody came up with that means somebody can think about it, can think of it. So people on the left are thinking about this now and saying, what if on January 14th, we have people in the crowd who are instigating violence? What are you going to do? And there was a whole thing on what to do. Put down your sign, sit down, let everybody see who's causing the violence, and proceed from there.
Yeah.
I didn't read the whole thing. But.
Yeah, and indivisible groups now are passing out little brochures. You fold them into a booklet on what to do to protect yourself if it happened, because they all see it coming.
Right.
And Martin Luther King knew what he was talking about, and that's what's called for now. When did that resistance rise up? It grew over a long period of time. We Americans want things. We want an answer right away. I mean, I'd really love for him to just have a heart attack with all that horrible diabetes, and that would solve everything. Not everything, because I know there's a lot more. It would solve a whole lot, because nobody else has his combination right now of power, money, and charisma. J.D. Vance, no. So I do think it would solve a whole lot. But that isn't going to happen, most likely, and we can't plan for that.
But
So,
even Martin Luther King, it took things like Selma, and it took television,
violence.
broadcasting violence for America to wake up to what was happening.
I do think, though, the thing is, we have seen violence. This is a coup. And I think that people think, oh, well, there was an election, so this is a coup. This is clearly a coup that's happened. And we are living in an authoritarian country, and we know it is authoritarian at this point in time because of the violence that's happening. And what I'm talking about are the fact that their homes are being broken into in the middle of the night by people working for the federal government under ICE, which is a terrorist organization. They are kidnapping people. They're wearing a mask. They're dragging them out.
You're one of those radical leftists. I've heard about it.
This is a fact. This is a truth. This is a fact. And then they're sending people, not to prisons, they're sending people to death camps in El Salvador. Now, that's extraordinary rendition. And they're taking people directly off of American soil and doing that. that is violent. It is happening.
And they're laughing about it.
It is not happening to those of us right now who are white and well-educated and are in a particular place. But that violence is coming for everyone. That will spread. And I think, to your point, it is very serious. I think it is unavoidable. And we just don't recognize the fact that the violence is happening now because maybe it hasn't impacted us directly.
Well, also the whole idea that for, I don't know how many years now, 10, 20 years, militias have been forming.
Right. The right is ready for this.
They have so many arms, and the left, we're not into guns. We don't have anything to fight back with, right? The thing is, there's places like Nevada and, out west where those militias are taking over the rule of law a lot of times and acting like ICE and different people to enforce what they think, okay, you're an immigrant, you're out, whatever. So it's already the blending between who's actually been deputized to do anything legitimately and not, that's very blurred.
I want to push back a little bit against your theory. I understand the whole thing, we're privileged, so we're not here yet, and it'll happen, but there's violence now. But they're not treating it that way. Their strategy on that is that the deportations, the American people want it, and indeed the polls show that, and it's all under a legal guise. And it's horrifying because they're now arguing that immigrants don't have the right to habeas corpus, or due process. That's legal. It is the cornerstone of the legal, the rule of law that we have always had. They do not see it in, and what we're talking about over here that this gentleman brought up is fighting in the streets. And that's what I'm saying, violence versus a strategy that they see as legal. And they're winning that one too.
I think that also we have seen fighting in the streets. And I think that January the 6th, again, I think saying this is a one-time, I moved here 2 years ago from the South. And beginning in 2017, from Charlottesville on, we saw fighting in the streets. During the 2020 racial justice uprisings, we saw Klan by the hundreds. We saw white nationalists by the hundreds. I was in Louisville, Kentucky, when they came in, 300 deep, armed to the teeth. And it's not looking like this constant sort of war in the street, but you have these punctuated events. And most people don't see that, but there definitely is violence. And I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, and likewise, I'm not disputing it. I just think they see it as a different category, and they are thinking about this. And here's another really horrible dark thought. What if January 6th had more deaths? You know, a couple of Republican congressmen preferably, more protesters. We're paying, you and I are now paying the Babbitt family $5 million for that insurrectionist who was violent.
Yeah, I drew a parallel to a burglary, that if somebody broke into your house and you took refuge in an inner room and they started breaking down the door, and you said, look, I have a gun. If you come through that door, I'm going to shoot you. That's exactly what happened in that situation. And the stand your ground crowd from Florida to Montana would say, I'm not paying a lawsuit for that. And that's exactly what happened. He said she knew full well, and the crowd on the other side of that door knew full well that there were armed people on the other side that were saying, do not do this, you're breaking the law, we will shoot you. And they shot her, and now the president, who pardoned everybody in that insurrection, is going to pay them $5 million. And I'm sure there's going to be more for, compensation for people who had to spend time in jail and so forth. Yeah, it's real disillusioning.
Okay, I was going to say, another elephant in the room, I think, is the misinformation. The fact that they've created a huge web of misinformation and the only time I see it a lot is when I'm at the gym, because they've got Fox News and MSNBC, and I can barely bear to look, but I do sometimes, to see what's coming out. And even with January 6th, it's all based on misinformation and rewriting reality. And in Oklahoma, it's now a standard as well, for high school standard, to talk about, how January 6th happened and how it was legitimate. I mean, I'm paraphrasing here.
Yeah, in Oklahoma, you have to teach that the election of 2020 was possibly rigged. That's required in the curriculum now.
So now it's codified in the standard.
What about the 2024 election? Does anyone think that that was rigged in any way?
Absolutely.
Did anyone have any?
That we cannot become conspiracy theorists. It's very tempting. I would love for it to be true, but I have not seen one piece of credible, verifiable evidence.
There's a lot of circumstantial evidence that people have put together, but I'm with Rosemary on this.
This is like, I don't think John Kennedy was assassinated by a bunch of people either. I think it was one guy. Sorry. It's very
But
attractive theory.
there are days of the week that I say to myself, whenever something like this comes up, I'm going to regret this in 10 years. And
Yeah,
say, oh my God.
I do
It's the
too.
one thing that I have thought, but Megan and I both work the elections here in Pownell, and I looked at her in the morning and I said, Pownell, however Pownell goes is how the country's going. And I sat there watching people check out. Now Pownell, Hillary won in Pownell, Biden won in Pownell, and we watched all these new voters coming in, and they were up to age 70. They were not kids who were voting for the first time. They were adults and coming in, and they're like, oh, what do I do with this now? Where do I go? And they
There were a lot of kids
and
too.
there were young people too. I was looking at her, I'm like, they're not here for Kamala. So Pownell, Trump took Pownell.
Right.
And I came home and I said to my husband, we don't need to watch because Trump's winning.
And I even want to push back on the idea of misinformation. I do believe there's tons of it, but it's much more than that. Trump was a master first in his first term and then in his third term in the way he campaigned. I got worried when Kamala's campaign began boasting about how many more canvassers she had. These are the people who go door to door. And Trump didn't have anything. He didn't have the ground game. Those are the old rules. You don't need a ground game anymore. You need someone who's going to spend 2 hours with Joe Rogan. You need someone who's going to talk to all of these little, men's rights, bro network, scary as anything kind of, that worked. Barron Trump led his father to the right way, and he won the election in large part because of his strategy on media. He knows how to use media. And that's different than misinformation. It's horrible, it's manipulation, but it's different than misinformation.
The term misinformation, though, like it's lies, there's a difference between misinformation
Oh, he does that
and
too,
lying.
yeah, he does that too.
So everything he says is misinformation, almost everything out of his mouth, this is misinformation.
And the media, we spend a lot of time blaming the media because we cover it. Well, do you not cover the President of the United States lying? Is that something that, we'll turn our cheek to that? No, I think he is really difficult to cover. And there's no way that we have come upon yet that actually gives the full horror of him to at least half of the country. CNN in the first term, how much heat did they take because, you gave him all this free publicity and you showed his whole rallies? How come I can turn that around and say, half the country watched this whack job spiel and dance around and lie, and they still voted for him? How come it's on the media, not on the voters? We have to face the fact that half the country likes Trump. They like what he's doing, they like the racism, they like the cruelty, they like all the things that we're sitting in here whining about, which is what they call it. They like it.
And they also buy a lot of the misinformation, which we had a long discussion about this as an editorial department, as a newspaper in general. When do we call something a lie, and when do we call it misinformation? There's misinformation, and then there's disinformation, which is the willful distribution of misinformation. It's a slightly politer word for a lie. And the Washington Post likes to use false and misleading statements and so forth. I said, look, once he's told what the truth is, if he wants to deny it, if he doesn't want to believe it, I don't care. It's a lie. And we're going to say that afterwards. And we did on the opinion page. We always said that. We did what I had hoped would be a devastating editorial. We did 2 editorials in a row, 2 Sundays in a row on Donald Trump before the election. And the headline on the second one was Donald Trump is unfit. And we gave 5 reasons why he is. And one of them was we just put a word on every one. It was predator. It was liar. It was corrupt, criminal, insurrectionist. I can't remember all 5 of them. But people said, one more, we'll take that.
We want that. That woman color, they picked it. And so we're all sitting around talking about solutions and protesting and not accepting the fact that half the country, at least that votes, I understand the whole, it's not half the country because a whole bunch don't vote well. When did they ever? A third party, we need a third party. Who's going to put it together? Even Theodore Roosevelt couldn't make a third party work. So I don't see any of these as solutions. I do think it's going to be demonstrations repeated over and over again, ones where we put our body and our safety on the line. I do think that's what's going to make a difference. And Jay, I love that editorial. I remember that very well. I posted about how great it was, just like I did about Fred Hyatt's. But it took us years to get to that point. It took us years to be able to say, the president's lying, we hate to say it, and maybe he was, maybe he misunderstood, maybe he didn't, he's just joking. No. And I'm sorry. We should have been saying it way earlier.
We did.
But if we did,
in 2016 we did. In 2016 we did it. We did the Electoral College issue too, which I think maybe one other newspaper in the whole country did an editorial.
That's
like that.
true.
We were just to explain what this was. This was. I went in really nervous. I was the editorial page editor that day, and this was a really radical idea. And I said, look, the Electoral College is coming up. I think we should argue that the Electoral College should pick another candidate. And everybody in the room looked at me and said, now, I want to explain something. I sat down and I read the Federalist Papers, and when you get to the part about the Electoral College, there's a very clear explanation. I read it to the board on what, I believe it was Hamilton, wrote about this. This is a description of Donald Trump, a man skilled in the low arts of popularity. And that's what the Electoral College was supposed to be there to stop America from ever having. And I could just see everybody's faces brightening up, and they go, "You've got like originalist argument for this. This is cool. Even Scalia can't argue with this one, or Alito, or Thomas." And we did, and it was the only call I ever got from the publisher. about his editorial.
What did he say?
He was very nice. He said, Jay, I just want you to know, we lost a $500,000 account today, advertising account, and we lost about 500 subscribers.
See that, Jeff Bezos? That's courage.
But he said, I also want you to know, we also picked up about as many new subscribers, and all the other ones, because they need local news, they're going to come back, and so is that advertiser. Don't worry about it. Great job. Keep it up. And, that was the kind of thing. So, yeah, I was happy.
You're right. I'm glad you brought that up, though. It still irritates me, though. It's like the Georgia prosecutor who has an affair with the prosecutor that she appoints to his corruption case. If you go up against Donald Trump, does it take a genius to realize that he's going to look for anything in your past and you better, purify yourself?
Yeah. I think this was we said it in the editorial. It does appear that at worst this is sloppy paperwork, which is not a good look for an attorney general or any lawyer. But whether it's more than that, we weren't quite ready to say it wasn't more than that. Whether it was, I can't read her mind to know if she wanted to get a favorable loan rate or she just signed the wrong piece of paper. Because for every paper, for the few 1 or 2 or 3 instances where there is apparent fraud, there's a paper somewhere else that counteracts that and says, this is not, I'm not going to really live here. This is not my permanent residence in Virginia. Right. And the argument, just to go a little into the weeds on it, because it is interesting, she lives in a house along with one in Albany probably, but she bought what was listed in the New York City records as a 5-unit house. She uses it and always has used it as a 4-unit house. Mm-hmm. The problem is that a 4-unit house and a 5-unit house is the dividing line. A 5-unit residence or a 4-unit residence is the dividing line between certain types of loans. One is a commercial, one is a residential. Mm. So she got a more favorable loan rate potentially by having it as a 4-unit house, even though everything about it says it was a 5-unit at one point. Officially, it's a 5-unit. Practically speaking, it's not. So it's a court's going to roll its eyes, I think.
Now, is it really? This is a liberal thing. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, Hunter Biden was a dirtbag and he deserved a criminal charge against him. She did mess up. And it's not the first time either. She went after Andrew Cuomo on sex charges when she herself wanted to be governor. That's a conflict of interest by any definition, and it's wrong. And not only that, but the report she issued on him said this is an offense for which he could be prosecuted. No prosecutor was willing to take on those cases, so that's not right. Yeah. And I think if you want to go after Donald Trump, you have to be absolutely squeaky clean, because really his techniques are always the same. He delays everything, he fights back, he looks for dirt on you, he turns it all against you. It's not really hard to see coming. And again, she's the Attorney General, she should have known better.
Yep. She should have. So. No question about it. It was sloppy stuff, and it may have been intentional. And she may have. I think any legal problem is going to be relatively minor. I think any political problem could be
major. Yeah.
Because he knows how to make something. She's going to be a crook after that. That's going to be
crooked Hillary all over again. Yeah, it's true.
So how do you think that's effective? I could ask that notion that to go after Donald Trump, right? That you have to be squeaky clean. And I'm not being hyperbolic here.
No.
He is one of the most flawed human beings I've ever witnessed. It's just the scope of the corruption. And just, there's so many, I mean, I don't need that many adjectives to describe one person, right? He's so horrifically flawed in so many ways. It's almost Shakespearean and comic. And the idea, though, but to go against him, you had better be squeaky clean. It's like,
Who is?
Really? Who is? And something about living in a glass house.
I'm sorry, Franny Willis, that was stupid. That was really stupid.
No, I agree, but what I'm saying is like, I don't, so what's... so
It's unfair,
why-
but that's the whole thing about Donald Trump. It's why we're so frustrated. Because what happened to karma? He'll get his. He has never gotten it. He has won.
Yes.
He is one of the richest, the most powerful, the most memorable man in three fields: media, politics, real estate. He's going in the history books, may not be totally positive, but he is there. He's a transformational president. He has gotten everything he said he was going to get against all kinds of odds, unbelievable odds. He's won. Doesn't that piss you off?
Oh, yes, it
Yeah,
is.
of course.
Of course it is.
But it's also
So
confirming.
squeaky clean,
Yeah, thank you.
if you're not squeaky clean, you just gotta know
Say
what's
it.
coming your way.
Yeah.
If you're gonna do it, that's all. It's just reality.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that he's a flawed person. Nobody really, well, we care, but a lot of other people obviously don't, like half the American people.
They appreciate that he's flawed and he's gotten
Exactly.
as far as it is because they feel, but many people feel, put down and neglected. And how this billionaire, possibly billionaire, he is now, I think, but this rich guy, this amazing global celebrity has identified with these people is part of this. We don't like to say it, but he does have some sort of genius for that.
And it feeds, what you're talking about, feeds into a very American tradition going back to at least Mark Twain, if not further, Will Rogers, all of them. It has always been a thing. They're all crooks.
Yeah.
And if Donald Trump is a massive crook and a daily, multiple times a day liar, it doesn't matter to certain people because he can always point to somebody who's a political enemy of his and say, they do it too. And it doesn't take a lot. It just takes a little
Right.
for him to be able to say, they're just as corrupt as I am. And then you blow it all out of proportion. You turn Hunter Biden bragging about access to his father into the Biden crime family, even though it's headed by a man who allegedly, can't even get dressed in the morning. Somehow he's a criminal genius, but he's also incompetent.
A
So-
mastermind and incompetent. Yeah, it's true.
But it's the whataboutism that is, he understands that and always has.
And uses it so effectively, he really does. And again, I go after lawyers and the legal field, which has empowered him. First, there's the whole Supreme Court thing that now he owns them. And he goes up for his, whatever it was, State of the Union that looked like address, and he thanks Jen Roberts. I'm going to remember you, John. Thanks for what you've done for me. Oh my God, that's corruption and conflict of interest right there. So there's that. But he also knows how to delay, and he uses judge shopping in the right way. I hate it, and I hate that he's so effective at it, but it's true. So, all right, so
We should have had convictions on all the cases that
Oh, yeah.
Jack
And they-
Smith had pending.
Well, and then there's a whole, do you blame Merrick Garland, who actually is a consummate lawyer, should be on the Supreme Court. Was he too cautious? He waited so long, he wanted all the I's dotted and T's crossed, and he let Trump escape, in essence. So, yeah, the field does not work for us, it's working for Trump, and he understands that. So when are Democrats going to get smart enough to play by the same rules? I was horrified at this again, whatever he called it. It wasn't really State of the Union because he had been in office yet. But when he went to the joint sessions of Congress and the little Democrats were sitting there with signs saying, liar, liar. Well, that was so ineffective. Why did they come at all? Because you have to be bold. You have to take actions that have never been taken before, like he is. And Democrats are not willing to do that. They still are being very proper, trying to keep the system to show by good example. It's not working.
We go high.
Yeah, I hated that. I hated it when she said it, and even she's reneged on that now. When she spoke this year, Michelle Obama, you know, when they go low, we go high. That worked.
What did she say?
She said that at the Democratic convention in.
No, but you said she's reneged.
Well, she did when she spoke at Kamala Harris's convention. She said I was wrong on that. She did back away from that. We have to fight fire with fire, and she actually has been a good model. She did not go to the inauguration. Why was Kamala Harris and Joe Biden? Why were they at that inauguration? Because that's proper. That's what we've always done. Except it's not like normal times.
Party, I'm sorry. Seriously.
Yeah.
Gloves have to come off.
Yeah, it does.
Sorry.
And okay, here's something I'm concerned. I do want to talk about Gaza. We're running out of time, but where are the young people? I teach college. Why are they not outraged? Where are the people of color? Now, many are being told, don't go to these demonstrations because of what we talked about earlier, that you can end up, you know, in jail or worse. So they're being kept away. But how do we get them involved? They are directly being attacked.
My wife was, she went to her first, the first demonstration she went to at the state capitol in Albany. She looked around, and it was well attended, but she also noticed the crowd looked very white. Well, you were there.
Very white.
I was
yep.
not.
It looks pretty old too, yeah.
It's very, yeah.
It looks like this.
Yeah, it looked like this audience.
I think that young people believe it can happen to them, like that they've grown up in a time of just amazing, like, privilege.
Yeah.
Yep.
There you go.
Not all young people, but lots and lots of young people have. And the ones who are disadvantaged, I don't think are necessarily into politics or into survival. Yeah. So, the people who have advantages, who are college educated or educated in any way, I think they think my life is going to go on. My life is going to be the same one way or the other. They don't even vote.
The youth have that sense of immortality anyway, just genetically speaking, during that time of their lives. So I think they just think.
Wait, we were at that time of our lives in the 70s, and we were in the streets. What's different?
Yeah,
They've become more privileged, I think, than you were.
Could I speak anecdotally about my own son, who's
Please.
28 years old, and this is only one person, and he was in the Army. When he came out of the Army, he was very right, Trumpy right. And now, when I see him, he hates Trump, he hates everything that he's doing, he's figured it out, but sees himself as totally powerless. Does not see any sense of community to join to deal with what's happening. Wow. And I'm powerless as to what to say to him to motivate him. He doesn't understand what we did in the 70s. He doesn't get it. And so that's only one example. So it's not that he feels privileged, right? He's just so busy taking care of his own life, and doesn't feel, and he does see that it could impact him because he runs his own business, and he's like, oh, well, this could happen and that could happen. So maybe I need to make sure I'm doing this or that. But he doesn't see himself as having any way to join in and do something.
That's right.
Where he thinks there would be an outcome. Now, ironically, when I was visiting in West Virginia, there's a coal mine in Beckley that has a coal mine museum, and he heard the whole story about how the coal miners unionized and changed what had happened through unionization. So at least he saw one example that change can happen, but I don't think that's part of their lives, and I don't know why exactly.
Do you think that that social media is kind of contributing to that sense of, no community, no?
Possibly, yeah.
No, they have their own communities. They're just not community-based. They're interest-based. They're like, oh, we're into makeup. Oh, we're into, those Japanese games things. They're not like, I'm into making Albany a better place or making Vermont a better state.
So is Peter Baker is a New York Times guy, right?
Right.
Well, he was on TV the other day. He's always on there, and they're always asking him stuff. And he says, my son,
who's a journalist too.
Yeah, well.
An
but he
award-winning
says-
journalist.
He said, well, I think he said his son said he doesn't care about any of the stuff that we talk about on this show. What did he mean by that?
Yeah, that's interesting because his son also is an award-winning journalist who's written about student protests over Gaza. Thank you, David, because that's the topic I really want to be talking about. It's really hard to look at the rest of the world when we are so messed up right now, and that's our first concern. But the Ukrainians are about to be turned over to Russia. That we're not going to win. That Congress is not going to act. And then there's Gaza, and this has all gotten mixed up as some sort of if you are in favor of Gaza not being like turned into dust, you're somehow a pro-terrorist and an anti-Semite. I lived in the Middle East. I worked in the Middle East. I have seen the way Palestinians were treated. I do not think the American media covers it well, and we should be listening to those students. They're right. We are aiding and abetting genocide, the starvation of children,
It just
the
keeps getting worse.
ethnic cleansing, and Netanyahu has been empowered. I'm sorry, and this is bipartisan. Joe Biden went up and hugged that idiot, that massive, cruel man. He hugged him. What did that say? And Donald Trump got support from Arab Americans. That breaks my heart because they felt that they could not award the Biden administration, which was supporting Netanyahu, with a vote, even though it might hurt them. And so they voted for Trump, who's far worse.
But he's gonna make a golf course out of Gaza.
Well, he truly is going to clean it out. It's ethnic cleansing by anybody's definition, and it's genocide by
And
any
it's forced
definition.
relocation, which is the other
Yeah.
human rights violation there. This is clearly against international law to forcibly relocate people. There's so many complications to this. We've written a few editorials on it, and it's always a very, it's a balance to try to do this right. I disagree with the definition of anti-Semitism that's been adopted, that criticism of Israel is now becoming de facto anti-Semitism. Calling for the dissolution of the Jewish state is another matter, but criticizing the Netanyahu regime, it is a genocidal regime, I think, and we're letting it happen.
We're aiding them. We're giving them the money for it.
Here's the weird thing about it. You mentioned that the Arabs are all, the Arab Americans are, I think the Arab world as a whole, aside from the organizations like Al-Qaeda that have they've put out very good videos for years on the suffering of the Palestinian people that they've used as recruiting tools. Aside from that, kind of the Arab street, so to speak, that can the people that they're trying to recruit, there's always been this real ambivalence about Palestinians in the Middle East. Egypt doesn't want them, Lebanon doesn't want them, Jordan doesn't. Nobody seems to want them.
Wait a minute.
And I don't understand why.
What other country accepts people from other places?
I don't disagree with you on that.
That is so racist. I hate that.
But they have kept them at an arm's length for that reason. I think that they feel like it's an either-or situation.
Israel has used that as a talking point. See, even their own Arabs don't want them. So we're right to. It's a horrible idea.
Yeah.
We do not accept. If suddenly there were conflict in Canada, we would accept Canadians or Mexicans, people of color.
Canadians might
No,
accept
we
us.
would not.
South Africans.
Yeah, white South Africans. You're right. It's just a terrible argument.
Aren't there a lot of Palestinians in Jordan?
The whole country is Palestinian
That's what I thought.
or of ancestry. Yeah, so
They
you
don't
see
have
there,
to- but they live in camps there.
yeah, they do.
I mean, they're refugees wherever they go.
Yep. They were the
and they
Nakba, the great disaster. Israel came in and took over the housing and the communities that were Palestinian to move in Jews that were coming in from around the world. This is not a religious issue. This is about territory and power and money. And I do believe, I believe that Israel has the right to exist. Let me make that really clear. I do not abide at all. I do believe that Israel has a right to exist as a nation. Absolutely. No question about it. And I think most Arabs have now accepted that too. And I know it's in Hamas's charter, but no one really, that is not a political reality anymore. But Israel has become like white settlers were in the American West. They're hugely powerful compared to Indians. Their right to feel under threat, indigenous people, but they wanted to kill the white people. They were right to be nervous. But there was such an overwhelming differential in force that it's not a fair fight. And we're supporting it. We're throwing in with Israel. It's appalling.
And the one thing that doesn't see, I think they've abandoned the idea of a two-state solution at this point, which is what
the real solution.
Which is what we've been arguing since, I want to say, I could actually pinpoint it if I looked up my mother's obituary, because there's a whole backstory there. I was writing the editorial when Obama went to the United States, was around the Middle East, and he gave a speech, I think, at Cairo University that was just magnificent. It was a really good speech about this very issue, and I sat down to write an editorial about it, and I got a phone call that my mother had died.
Wow.
And I had my boss said, "Go, just go." I said, "I'm in the middle of an editorial. I got to finish it." And my mother had been a fundraiser for Israeli bonds. She had met Netanyahu at one point in her life. She's very passionate, but we had a discussion about 2 months before she died about this whole thing, and she, this adamant Hadassah member and everything, was a very strong supporter of the idea of a two-state solution. And she thought that Israel was really wrong in trying to prevent it, and that Netanyahu was wrong in trying to prevent it. And so it was it was a real cathartic thing to write this. And of course, I got an angry phone call from my good friend Shelley Shapiro, who's the head of the Jewish Federation, and she started to tell me that I was she all but called me a self-hating Jew, and I said, "Well, let me tell you a little story about my mother." And I had her in tears by the end of the phone call.
Netanyahu uses many of the same Trump techniques, and one of them, they have very strong talking points. If you are pro-Palestine, I am pro-Palestine. That means I'm for Hamas. No, I'm not. I'm not for any terrorist organization. And the other thing is the Holocaust. You can't mention the Holocaust. It has nothing to do. People who were victims of the Holocaust cannot commit another Holocaust. That's the view. It's baloney.
Right.
Of course it's horrible, and you wish that it were different. But these are still people, and we are really mean to each other.
And there's two dimensions to this in our country going on. One is the actual issue of Gaza and Israel and a war and what we do about all that. But the other issue is that there's a brilliant piece, I think it was in the Atlantic recently, about the two systems of justice that were going on in Germany in the rise of the Nazi regime. For most of for normal Germans, for the average middle-class Germans, there was the same system of justice that they always knew. There was a court system. You could go to court. You could sue people. You could get arrested for minor infractions or even major infractions, and you would go through a normal system. But then there was another system of justice that was run by the Gestapo and the SS, and that was the system of justice that was like this parallel, anonymous, totalitarian system. I don't want to say we're there, but what they did was they picked out discrete groups that were going to be Jews, Gypsies, radicals,
Roma.
Communists, Roma,
Homosexuals, yeah.
all that. They were subjected to the other system of justice. And that is what we just witnessed. That's what we are witnessing with the Palestinian protesters. That Trump is trying to just throw these people out of the country, arrest them, throw them into detention facilities, and going after the universities to shut down the speech. It's not just to root out anti-Semitism, as Elise Stefanik would like to claim, and some of the people in Congress and Trump would like to claim. It's to shut down the speech and control the education that people get, what the departments are, what they teach, and so forth.
And that brings
that's
us
scary.
to a New York Times article in the past weekend on Project Esther, brought to you by the same folks who wrote Project 2025, where, Jay, I'm going to shut up. You talk about this because it's horrifying. This is what is happening right now was laid down, the plan was laid out, and it's actually happening now. And Trump's saying, no, I never heard of that. He's doing everything that this plan asked him to do.
Yeah, some of you probably read about this, the Esther Project. This is courtesy of the same people the same organization. I don't know how big the Heritage Foundation is, but they must be enormous.
Really?
You kind of wonder how do they do? How do you get every day an outrage? How do you get this sprawling thing that you can barely keep track of? And I'm a journalist. I'm a junkie for this stuff. I can't keep track of everything that's going on. Donald Trump is not doing this all alone. He's got remember the Project 2025 included basically a job bank of people who could apply for the job. They wanted to have about 25,000 people ready to step into federal jobs. And now Trump is fighting, and I think he's winning, or has won the argument on whether or not he can just fire all and deunionize
Any
federal workers.
Yeah.
And basically turn the federal workforce into one giant conservative workforce with the blessing of the Heritage Foundation, vetted by the Heritage Foundation. So the same people that Project 2025 bring you the Esther Project. And the Esther Project is simply to eradicate anti-Israel, pro-Palestinian dissent in this country. And so, this is it. This is that parallel system of justice going on, and it's very well organized. And what's astounding about it, when you read it, is I think there was one or two Jewish people, and a whole bunch of non-Jewish people who were behind the organization of this. And
Lots of Christian groups.
So
Yeah.
you've got your
lots of conservative.
Messianic Jews, the old Jews for Jesus from my generation, the apocalyptic end times kinds of Christians who believe that Israel needs to exist as a Jewish state because then we can get the second coming. I don't fully understand. I don't profess to. And it goes to the heart of what we were talking about just before this, that it's the idea of shutting down progressive thought in America or liberal thought in America in favor of conservative thought. If this was just a difference of opinion, it would, and a political argument, I would say, as a journalist, might not be so passionate about this, but going back to what I said originally, something's wrong when you see it, and
the plot is exactly what's happening. That anybody who speaks in favor of Palestine is pro-Hamas. That students who are caught protesting need to be punished or deported if they're foreign students. All of this is actually happening. It's not like it just began happening, it's plotted out. That's terrifying to me.
You think the Trump organization or the Heritage Foundation really cares about anti-Semitism? I think
good point.
It's just one more front in the culture wars.
Yep.
They really are after colleges, and that's what they're
This is
after.
the wedge.
Liberalism, yeah. Any way they can use, publicity about somebody who demonstrated at Columbia, they're not standing up for the rights of Israel. They want
Absolutely.
to attack Harvard, they want to attack Columbia.
They're racist too. They want to attack the brown people.
Yeah.
That's why they're,
I was, we thought we would talk a little bit, and we're completely getting out of time here, but on how you cope with all this frustration and worry that we rightly have. And for me, one of them is gardening. I love being in a garden. I love weeding. All my garlic mustard I call Donald as I rip them out. It's very relieving.
oh my God!
And
There's a marketing idea.
I know.
Donald seeds.
Yeah, for Mother's Day, I asked for a bullhorn, but I didn't get it. Instead, I got a toilet brush that has a huge mop of orange hair and a Donald face. So yeah, my kids really know me. But I was saying gardening is one of my reliefs, and I went to a master gardening. I did my office duty. You have to put in hours of volunteer work, and the computers were down. And I wondered why, and our director explained that they were all down because all Cornell University, that's the extension service that runs the master gardeners in all of our counties, has required all scrubbing of all DEI mention. So we hire under EEOC ruling, that's a DEI mention has to come out. The policies are not changing, but the boasting of it, the advertising that we're fair and independent, woke, has to be removed. So it's like, oh my God, when my distraction is part of this now and I have to be outraged about this, what am I going to do? I need gummies.
It is an abrupt change to talk about coping strategies, but we literally have 2 minutes.
We literally have 2 minutes, so go Jay.
So my coping strategies are, I am now hitting the heavy bag again. I didn't used to do that. When I retired, or semi-retired, I took up, I long studied martial arts, and I kind of got lazy about it. I was what they call a Ronin for a long time. But I found a karate school up in Amsterdam, and I took it for a year, and my body was progressively rebelling against it, and I finally had to quit. So I took up Tai Chi, and it just incorporated so much in a softer way, obviously. I had done Tai Chi many years ago and just found it too quiet, too soft. I had a lot more energy out of it, a lot more stuff to burn off. So Tai Chi, we own a small farm. We don't grow crops or anything like that. We have a big garden, we have a greenhouse, and a couple of horses and chickens. And there are days I walk out of the living room while my wife is doom scrolling, and I say, "Hun, I'm going out to the greenhouse. Join me," or "Let's get the garden going. It's spring," and I read. Which I didn't do for a long time in my career because it's just so busy, and I'm reading all, briefs and PDFs and all that stuff. So I'm finally reading real books again, and of course picked happy things to read, like It Can't Happen Here, and All the Light We Cannot See. But I did just pick up because, speaking of salons, my sister, I was telling her about a book that I'm 8 chapters deep into now that I'm writing, and she said, "I don't think it's a good book."
That's cheering.
Yeah, it was all. I said, we had a bit of. She was drinking scotch, I was drinking bourbon. I don't think I really communicated all the nuance of the book, but she said, "You're just writing this for yourself. You need to read some Hemingway." So she told me her favorite book, I didn't know this until now, was A Movable Feast. So, and apparently it's all about Paris and
Yes, Paris
all
in
that.
the
So
20s.
that's my new,
A salon. That's what Gertrude Stein's salon was. You brought us full circle. Did you do that on
I
purpose?
absolutely
That
did.
was brilliant.
I did. The other book, by the way, on the coffee table in the study is Rules for Radicals. If everybody remembers Sarah Palin, she used to talk about Saul Alinsky all the time. I finally decided to read Saul Alinsky. So those are my two diversions.
Do you want to teach Tai Chi here at the club?
I'm not an instructor, but sure. My students, I teach Kyudo as well, Japanese Zen archery.
See, would you guess this about this guy? He's got hidden depth there.
I went to do Tai Chi before class one morning, and a few of the students said, "Could you teach us?" So I suddenly became sensei, and I got no belt, I got nothing. Yeah, anytime.
So we want to thank you all for coming. Please give us feedback. Please come again. We're going to be back on June 16th, right? Which is right after the parade and we hope massive demonstrations. So we'll do we'll dissect it, find out how we think about it. And I very much appreciate your coming here. Thank you for your service.